Good afternoon, tribe. I hope you guys are doing great. Today we're talking to Danielle, who's an L&D nurse, and she's going to tell us all about being a nurse in L&D and answer all of your questions. So hi, Danielle.
Hi there.
So you got a ton of interest with this Q&A, which I'm really excited about. So we're going to do our best to answer all of the previously entered questions. Those of you who are attending live, go ahead and enter your questions and hopefully we can get to them. So we're going to get started because we've got a lot to cover. What did you do prior and how did it prepare you for being a nurse in L&D?
So L&D is the first nursing job I've had. So I've been in there since I graduated. But previous to being a nurse, I was actually a birth doula because I knew I wanted to do labor and delivery, and I knew that that was what I was going to do. So before I had gotten into nursing school and throughout nursing school, I actually trained and was hired at one of the local hospitals as a birth doula. So that was able to give me actual experience being with labor and delivery. And so that just helped me a ton, just be able to learn how to talk to women in labor and to be around women that are in labor and their families and the different things that can happen. So it just kind of helped with that more social, emotional part of being a labor and delivery nurse.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Let's see. I was trying to pull up our Q&A on the Facebook page and it wasn't working. Okay, so do you feel like L&D is a good place for a new grad to start without the doula experience? How do you feel like that transition would be?
I think it very much depends on the person. There are some people that know that labor and delivery is something they're super passionate about and that's all they want to do. Then, coming out of school and going into that's great. But the thing to know is labor and delivery is a very high stress environment. And so if it can be difficult for new grads to kind of get all their footing with time management and prioritization and all those things while managing a high stress environment. So I think it really just depends on the person. On my unit, we have had a ton of new grads that have trained and they're great nurses. And so, we always are welcome to have new grads, but I think it very much depends on the institution and the person.
Awesome. We have quite a few viewers that are just popping in. So you guys, if you have questions, please get them entered so we can get them answered. Okay, so how do you feel like those people that are new grads in your department, do you feel like they stay around? What's that longevity like in terms of retention of employees versus those who have previous experience?
To be honest, I think for my department, our new grads actually stay longer than the nurses who have had prior experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like you come into it and then it's all and you've learned to adapt to the high stress. You've learned to manage all the different aspects of labor and delivery versus sometimes it's nurses coming in that are like, I just want something different and I want to see how this is. And then they get into it and they're like, oh no, I could go somewhere else and not have to deal with this much stress or, whatever. So I think it's very different and it depends, but new grads do really well.
That's good to know. So Allison asked, what's the process of orientation like if a nurse has 1 year of experience in med-surg? So I think maybe just combine this question with what's orientation like for a new grad versus an orientation for a med-surg nurse?
So it's actually the same. Yeah. Because regardless, you're coming into a specialty. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm hearing the echo on your end.
Oh, is it? Good. Thank you for letting me know.
It's okay.
I'll turn this. Is that any better?
Yes. So much
Good.
better. Okay,
Thank you for
thanks.
telling me.
It's actually the same. So regardless, you're still coming into a specialized specialty. So you're still going to have to learn the ins and outs of the unit. With our orientation, whether you're a new grad or a nurse with experience, it's about 12 to 14 weeks, give or take. And then there's 1 week of full OR experience, and where you're just doing OR cases for a whole week. And then there's a week of didactic with the UBE learning, different equipment and different stuff.
Okay, cool. Rachel asked, was it hard to get hired into L&D?
For me, it wasn't, only because I actually got hired as I was doing my capstone on that unit as a nursing student. And, I was able to go ahead and get in. It is hard by the fact that anytime we do post jobs, we have so many applicants, and so you just have a lot of people that are fighting for the job. And actually, like, our nurse retention on my unit is pretty long, so we don't have a lot of new positions coming up, because our nurses stay around for a long time.
That's good. That's awesome. And do you know, by chance, is that standard across L&D, or does that just happen to be in your facility?
I'm not exactly sure. I do know that across labor and delivery, it is hard to get into, especially without experience. I work in a teaching hospital, so I think the culture is very much about, we're willing to teach people. We know people have to learn somewhere, so we're willing to do that. But depending on the institutions in the area, I know that, like, with private hospitals and things like that, it's a lot harder to get into L&D with no nursing experience and no labor and delivery experience.
Well, and I think your experience as a doula probably really gave you an upper hand in that hiring process.
Yeah, and I knew what it was that I wanted to do, and so in nursing school, I had gotten an internship on the newborn ICU, so then that way I could still have, like, something related to babies, women's health, things like that. So I think just having those other experiences helps with getting hired.
Okay. We had a viewer, D, says there's still really bad feedback. So let me address that real quick. I turned my sound down a little bit. Is it still interfering when Danielle's talking? Because if that's the problem, she needs to turn her sound down a bit.
I turned mine down just now.
Okay. D, let us know if that's helpful, or anybody that's experienced feedback issues. So Elena asked, why in most places do we need to have med-surg experience before entering L&D?
I think that's very much because med-surg, you learn kind of like the theory of nursing, and you're able to learn, your prioritization, delegation, being able to manage lots of different things. And I think that is like a huge component when you then transfer over to labor and delivery. And so it then just helps people already have like that basis, and then they're not having to learn how to do that, plus then do all the stuff actually related to labor and delivery.
Yeah, that's good. So are there any specific certifications to your specialty? And if you've done the certifications, how did you prepare?
So with my, with labor and delivery, you can get your RNC, in OB. And so you can get your specialized certification for labor and, for obstetrics, like inpatient. And then you can also get certified with, it's called ALSO. So it's actually Advanced Life Support for Obstetrics. And so it's going to be like your ACLS, but different. And then you can also get like certifications for fetal monitoring. And I think that's kind of like a good array. I do not have my RNC. I am actually planning to sit for my exam in February. So February, March. So just, just like how you study for the NCLEX, you have a big book of knowledge and info and test questions, and then you just start working your way through with studying all of that.
Okay, good. Let's see. What does a typical day look like?
So typically, you know, it's always different. And so that's something that I love about L&D. But, you know, we all get group report with my unit. So the shift gets report on all the patients. And that's helpful because depending on how stuff is going, you may be watching someone else's patient. And we're always looking at everybody's patient. So it's kind of good to know what's going on. And so we get group report, then we go out. You get report with your nurse of your patients. And then you'll start with just doing like your assessments, like how you typically would. And then you just kind of start working through the shift. It depends on if your patients are getting close to delivering, if maybe there's a C-section that's going to be going, you're going to have to start prepping for that. But typically you're monitoring the fetal heart rates, you're keeping an eye on that, and then you're going to be managing whatever medications, or if there's other augmentation that the patient is having for their labor, you'll be managing that up until either it's 7 o'clock or they have a baby, and then you're working and doing the delivery.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
It's okay. So if your mom is laboring and actually, or not laboring, if they're actually delivering, another nurse will cover your other patients?
Yeah. So once you start the pushing process with your patient, you then become one-to-one. So if you have 2 patients, which the max that you can have on the labor and delivery unit for safe staffing, which we do follow at my hospital, is 2 patients.
2 patients.
So if you are pushing with one of your patients, you are then one-to-one with them until they're delivered and recovered.
Okay.
Sorry.
I hear your precious baby. If you need to go get him or her, is it a boy or a girl?
It's a boy. I'm just going to grab him.
Okay. Go grab him, please. Please do. Hopefully the feedback's a little better, guys. Oh, Marie, she just answered your question. 2-to-1 is the max patient ratio. So good question. She had not answered that prior. Okay, let's see. What's your little guy's name?
This is Nolan.
Hi, Nolan. His face is covered by the title. Let's see his handsome face. Look at him. He's so cute. All right. So Rachel asked, how much of a role in the birth do nurses actually have?
So this is something that is going to be different between being at a private hospital versus a teaching institution. At my hospital, the nurses do not do cervical exams because we're having our residents learn how to do that. So up until like the birth, the doctors are going to be the ones that are in there checking the patient, seeing if they're completely dilated, and then the doctors are going to be the ones who are going to start actually like pushing with the patient and help coaching them through that pushing process. At a private hospital, the nurse is the one who starts doing that. So the nurse will be there pushing with the patient because pushing can take a while. And then they call the doctor in when the baby's almost about to be born. So for me, I'm there and I'm basically kind of more so focused on the charting aspect of it. Then as soon as the baby comes out, I'm going to be the one that's going to be drying and stimulating the baby, making sure the baby looks okay. If for any reason the baby needs to have resuscitation, me and the other nurse that is in there for the delivery will then be doing the resuscitation. So that is something that very much only the nurses do. Doctors do not do any kind of neonatal resuscitation. And then during the birth, you're going to be there just basically helping, making sure that all the postpartum medications are going, as long as your patient isn't bleeding too much. You're going to just start working on their recovery and managing that. But things happen. So there have definitely been times where I'm there with my patient and all of a sudden she is having a baby. So then I'm the one who's there catching the baby and delivering the baby, and you just call for more people. So sometimes you get to do it, and then other times you're just kind of there managing both the mother and the baby postpartum.
Okay. Okay, good. Roxanne asked, can an OR nurse easily transition into L&D or vice versa?
So you are going to be circulating as a labor and delivery nurse. You circulate and you would still be doing PACU. So in that aspect, it is in a way an easy transition because you're going to know how to work in an OR. You're going to know how to prep patients and things like that. However, that's just a facet of what happens with labor and delivery. So, I mean, I don't see why not. You could easily transition and then start learning the bedside, portion of it. But, and then I don't know anything really else about OR nursing, so I don't know if L&D nurses can transition to OR.
Okay, good point. Dana says, Danielle, what the heck? How did I turn this on to a friend? Crazy.
Oh, that's my coworker.
Marie says, how long are they typically on your floor before they go to mother baby?
So my hospital is an LDR, so that stands for labor, delivery, recovery. So they're typically on our floor for anywhere from an hour to a couple hours, depending on how the mom's doing postpartum. There are other labor and delivery or other hospitals that they would be what is called LDRPs. So they're going to be labor, delivery, and postpartum, where then you stay there after you deliver the whole entire time until you're discharged.
Is this typically smaller, like community hospitals?
I think it kind of depends because one of my nurses is going to be moving out to Dallas. So we were kind of scouting out the hospitals out there, and we were having to decipher like which of the major hospitals were LDRs versus LDRPs because she didn't want to work in an LDRP. So I'm not entirely sure. I think it just very much depends on the type of hospital.
And that'd be interesting too, because I think that your patient to nurse ratio would definitely change if you're an LDRP versus just an LDR.
Exactly. So once a patient is postpartum, and then before so I think then they probably change the staffing of how you would then manage patients if that maybe there's nurses that are only there to handle them once they're postpartum versus when they deliver. So I think it all just kind of depends. But typically they're there on our unit for about 2 hours, sometimes longer.
Okay. Good question. All right. So how often do you get pushback against physicians for how they act or decisions they make that you don't feel are right?
I think this is another thing that just speaks to my institution. Because we are a teaching hospital, it's kind of the nurses are very much respected for their insight and their knowledge. So, I mean, you're going and telling the doctors that are learning what you think. And oftentimes they are receptive to that. It's not, I feel like there's not necessarily as much issue with doctors wanting to do things that you don't think is right. It's more so you're trying to tell the doctors that they need to do something and they're not wanting to do it yet. And so,
for instance,
I will say that with labor and delivery and with us, we are very protective of our patients and we advocate very fiercely for our patients. So you kind of learn to just be able to be like, no, this is what we need to do and manage that out. We have had instances, but you have your charge, you have your chain of command that's there and they help you navigate that. But for the most part, everyone's understanding that we're just trying to do what's best for our patients.
Sure. Marie said, you say that you float. Do you float to NICU?
So I do not float to NICU. once upon a time at my hospital, they did do that, or NICU nurses would float to us. In terms
Oh, that's
of
interesting.
for us, all we do is we do labor and delivery. You're going to then work in the OR. You're going to work in the PACU on labor and delivery. And then you're going to work
Okay.
in OB triage. And so
Yeah.
those are kind of like the 4 areas that you would be working on. But we always have enough patients, so there's not really ever an issue with us needing to go somewhere else.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are your top 3 challenges as an L&D nurse?
Hold on.
No, you're good. Nolan's such a good screenshot. He's doing just fine.
Yeah, he's usually pretty calm.
That's awesome.
I think definitely the top 3 challenges is it's high stress. You don't just have 1, 2 patients. Really, in theory, you have 4 because you have the baby.
Right.
Sometimes you have 5 if you have twins, or I have had quadruplets before. So, those are all your patients, and things can change very quickly and very drastically. And in labor and delivery, minutes matter. And, when you're having to suddenly rush a patient to the OR because you know that they need to have this baby out immediately, it's stressful. There's all kinds of just really stressful things. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges for labor and delivery is just learning to manage the stress. And we've had plenty of nurses who don't stay because they can't handle the stress of it. I think one of the other challenges is more just kind of like the emotional aspect of it. Everyone, I think a lot of people have this idea that labor and delivery is rainbows and butterflies and babies are being born and it's like, oh, happy. But there is a huge opioid epidemic. So you're having tons of women with drug abuse problems or homelessness or, just all of these really kind of just not ideal situations. And it's really hard to have to kind of leave that at work and to, go home. And especially if you have your own kids, then be what type of life are these babies having, or these moms, what are they having to do afterwards? And it can be really hard just having to navigate that. And then I feel like those are the 2 really big challenges when it comes to labor and delivery. I don't know if I could necessarily think of a third one. It is a specialty, so it's just a lot of knowledge that you have to know that's very specialized. And so you're then the go-to if people need you in other areas of the hospital for pregnant women.
Okay. I think that's a really good overview. Some of you viewers are saying that it's still echoing a little bit. Sorry, we've tried the tricks that I know of. Danielle, I don't know if you can move your mic back away from your face a little bit. That might be helpful. But I think from what other viewers are saying, it's mostly on Danielle's end. So She's turned her volume down, and unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it. I apologize.
Is it better now that I've changed how I'm holding it up?
Viewers, if it's better now, let us know. Let's move on to the next question. That one you've already answered. Jessica Bates, and I'm actually going to do a combo question here. Jessica Bates asked, how do you help a mama cope with the loss of her baby? And then on the same aspect, how do you decompress? Is there options or opportunities available for you guys as nurses to decompress after a stressful shift, whether that be a loss or something of that nature? So kind of a combo question, but how does that work?
So specifically for me, when I was actually a doula, I had started my training as a loss doula. So I was actually starting to just kind of learn techniques and ways of how to help families cope with the loss of their baby. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is when that's happening, you don't have to say anything. I think a lot of times people feel like they have to say something, and sometimes those things can be insensitive. So, you know, you don't have to say, oh, well, you can have another baby, or, you know, like something like that. And one of the biggest things has been, I just acknowledge the fact that this is still their child. I ask what their baby's name is. I ask, you know, things about the baby. And then I also validate the fact that, like, your baby is so precious. Like, oh, look at their hair. Look at how cute they are. Because so many times moms and families who lose a baby, they talk about how they feel as if their child isn't validated as being their child anymore. And so many times I know that when I've first told my patients, like, your baby's beautiful, like, look at your baby and things like that, that just means like a lot to them. And when patients, and just being there to, I mean, I've cried with patients, and, you know, you just, and assuring them that, you know, it's not their fault. A lot of times moms think that they did something to make something happen. And a lot of times that's not the case. And even if it was, that's not something that you need to validate in somebody, and you just support them. And then we do have, you know, like, resources. There is like counseling available. We do have the chaplains that we can talk to specifically that can help us decompress. Me and my coworkers are really close, so, you know, we will talk to each other after a shift and just be like, hey, this is what happened, like, and work through it. Because they're the ones going through the trenches with you, so it's really good to talk with them and just help them decompress. And then I go to the spa. I go to the spa a lot and just take time self-care. So that all helps.
Absolutely. Joanna had something to add. She said, great answer. Sometimes saying nothing is better. During the moment it's happening, you just do what you have to do. And just like she said, treat the situation like it's still their baby. So let's see. What are the characteristics that make a nurse successful in your area?
I think being able to be almost, you know, resilient, by being able to handle the stress, handle the fast-paced nature of it, being able to think quickly, because a lot of times that's very much what you're doing, but still being able to be compassionate and human with people helps a lot. And then I think just you have to just be able to manage not taking everything home with you. And I think that that's something that you either learn or you realize that maybe labor and delivery is not for you, because sometimes people just have a hard time disconnecting, and it just becomes overwhelming for them.
Sure. Okay, guys, viewers, I just want you to know we'll be closing out soon. So if you have any additional questions, get them in. If you have additional questions after the end, go ahead and enter them here on the Q&A, and Danielle is happy to answer them after the Q&A is over. So I'm just going to ask two more questions. One being, what's the greatest moment you've had in your position as an L&D nurse?
I don't know if I could just pick one moment, but so many times I go home from work and I think about, like, how awesome is my job that I literally am such an important part of the most important moment of families' lives. And I think that there's been times where I've had patients that I've actually had them all 3 of my shifts, and it's been a really long delivery, and then you're there to finally, like, help them meet their baby, and then to be there and see, like, the excitement with the families. And I love surprise deliveries, and I always have the dads tell everybody, like, what the baby is, and then it's always just really fun and exciting when, you know, they're finding out what their baby is and stuff. So, I mean, I feel like I love my job. I think it's the best job ever. And so I can't just pick one moment.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you shared all of this expertise with us. It's been great. And then the last thing, which I think you already answered for the most part, but what you love most and what you feel like is the hardest part of this specialty, anything you want to add?
I think it's just, I mean, I love it because it's such an awesome thing that's happening. You're getting to experience like the power of women and the power of the human body, and that it's able to have another baby. um, but then the hardest part is just for less than ideal situations, or, excuse me, is then the just like the stress and when things can get scary. It can just be really hard. And then of course, nobody should have to go home from the hospital without their baby. And so
Yeah.
that's definitely by far the hardest thing.
Sure. Another viewer, Joanna, mentioned that some hospitals provide memory items after the fact, after the loss, a memory box if you'd like, things with a lock of hair, hand and footprints, baby blankets, etc.
Yeah, and we
Nolan's coming back.
and we do that too. And I'm actually one of the ones for my residency project. I actually wrote about the just like the loss program that we had. And so, you know, we have all kinds of like crocheted blankets, we have memory boxes, we get handprints. Sometimes we'll do molds if we're able to do that. So we just try and create as many memories as possible. And I mean, I've been there and I've taken the patient's phone and I've taken tons of pictures of them as a family and taken pictures of the baby. So in that way they can remember that. And then just connecting them to resources afterwards.
That's awesome. Well, Danielle and Nolan, thank you guys so much for your time. Hi, buddy. Hi. No smiles. There's a little one. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know all the viewers are really interested, and we had a ton of questions. So let's see. Dina said, great job, Danielle. I'm proud of you. And someone else said, agree, things on L&D can go from good to bad really quick. So I think that's the end. I appreciate your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Yes, you too. Thank you.